I said nothing. I just stood up from the dinner table, walked over to where it had landed, and picked up my father's watch. The crystal was cracked. A thin line ran across the face, splitting the Roman numerals at 3:30. My hands didn't shake as I wiped the gravy from the case with my napkin. Behind me, Brian's voice filled the dining room. "Seriously, David? You're going to make a scene over that piece of junk?" I turned the watch over. The inscription on the back was still there, worn but readable. "To Robert, with love and pride, 1952. My father had carried this watch every day of his working life. It had been on his wrist when he built the house Jennifer grew up in, when he taught me to fish, when he held Sarah for the first time, 2 months before the stroke took him. "Dad." Jennifer's voice was soft, apologetic. "Brian, didn't mean. Dryan, I meant exactly what I said." Brian leaned back in his chair, swirling his wine. He was still wearing his suit from the office, his tie loosened just enough to look casual. "That watch is worthless. You could buy 10 of them on eBay for $50, but you drag it out every family dinner like it's the crown jewels." I slipped the watch into my pocket. Across the table, Sarah was staring at her plate, her small hands folded in her lap. She was 8 years old enough to understand when adults were fighting, old enough to feel the tension that had been building in this house for months. "I'll be going now," I said. "Oh, come on." Brian spread his hands in mock exasperation. "Don't be so sensitive. I'm just saying, if you're going to get emotional about stuff, maybe choose something that's actually worth something. Like that property out by Riverside your father left you. Now that's valuable. Prime development land. But you just let it sit there growing weeds." I looked at my daughter. Jennifer wouldn't meet my eyes. Her hand rested on Brian's arm, a gesture I'd seen 100 times before. Placating, apologizing for me. "Grandpa?" Sarah's voice was almost a whisper. "Can I walk you to your car?" "Finish your dinner, sweetheart," Brian said. He didn't even look at her. "Sarah can walk me out," I said. In the driveway, under the amber glow of the porch light, Sarah slipped her hand into mine. We walked slowly to my truck. The neighborhood was quiet. Through the windows of the other houses, I could see families finishing their own dinners. Normal families, I thought. Families where fathers didn't throw their father-in-law's inheritances across the room. "Is the watch really broken?" Sarah asked. I pulled it out and showed her. "Just the crystal. The watch still works. Brian says a lot of things are worthless." She was looking at her shoes. "He says Mom's paintings are worthless too." He made her take them down from the living room. I knelt down, my knees protesting, until I was at her eye level. Sometimes grown-ups say things when they're angry, or when they don't understand something's real value. "Are you angry at Brian?" "No, sweetheart. I'm not angry." She looked at me with those serious eyes, so much like her grandmother's. "Grandma liked that watch. She told me once that Grandpa Robert wound it every morning for 40 years. "She told you that?" "Before she got sick." We were looking at the photo albums. Sarah's voice got smaller. "I miss Grandma." "Me too, honey. Me too." I hugged her, feeling how thin she'd gotten. Jennifer said she was a picky eater, but I wondered if there were other reasons. When I pulled back, there were tears on her cheeks. "Hey now," I said softly. "It's okay. I don't like it when people are mean to you. I can handle mean, Sarah. I've handled worse. You just focus on being 8 years old, all right? Let the grown-ups worry about grown-up things." Brian appeared in the doorway. "Sarah! Homework!" She squeezed my hand once more, then ran back toward the house. I watched her disappear inside, then climbed into my truck. In the rearview mirror, I could see Brian standing in the doorway, his phone already at his ear, making a call, making a deal. Brian was always making deals. The next morning, I took the watch to Chen's shop on Market Street. I'd known Thomas Chen for 20 years. He'd repaired Helen's grandmother's brooch when the clasp broke, fixed the clock tower at the Methodist church. His hands were steady, his eyes sharp behind jeweler's loops. The shop smelled like machine oil and old wood. Glass cases displayed rings and necklaces, but the real work happened in the back room, where Chen had a workbench that looked like it belonged in a museum. David. Chen looked up from whatever delicate mechanism he was working on. Been a while. Need a new crystal, I said, sliding the watch across the counter. Chen picked it up, turning it in the light. His expression changed. This is your father's watch. You remember it? Robert brought it in a few times over the years. Beautiful piece. Swiss-made, 1940s. They don't make them like this anymore. He examined the cracked crystal. What happened? Accident at dinner. Chen was too polite to ask more. He opened a drawer, pulled out a jeweler's loupe, and started examining the watch more closely. Then, he paused. His fingers moved along the edge of the case. David, when's the last time this was serviced? Not since my father died. 6 years ago. May I? He gestured toward the back room. I followed him to his workbench. The afternoon sun came through the high windows, casting long shadows across the scattered tools. Chen sat down, adjusted his lamp, and began working on the watch with movements so precise they looked choreographed. The case, he murmured. There's something. I watched as he used a thin tool to probe the edge where the case met the back. There was a soft click. Chen's hands stopped. I'll be damned, he said. What is it? He turned the watch toward me. The back of the case had opened, revealing a hidden compartment I'd never known existed. Inside was a folded piece of paper, yellowed with age, and something else, something that glinted in the light. Chen used tweezers to carefully extract the contents. The paper was folded small, but even before he unfolded it, I could see the official seals, the formal typeface, legal documents. David, Chen said quietly, I think you should look at this. The first document was a deed. Property deed for 47 acres on Riverside Road. My father's land. The land I'd inherited but never developed, never sold, despite Brian's constant suggestions that I was sitting on a gold mine. But it was the second document that made my hands go cold. It was a letter in my father's handwriting. The ink had faded, but the words were clear. David, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and you've finally opened the watch like I hoped you would. I put these papers here because I wanted to make sure they stayed safe. Make sure they stayed with someone who understood their real value. The Riverside property isn't just land. It's where I proposed to your mother, where we used to take you fishing when you were 5, where I taught you that some things matter more than money. I've had offers to sell, big offers, developers who see dollar signs where I see memories. I turned them down every time. Now it's yours, and you'll get those same offers. You'll feel the pressure to cash in. Don't. Not because the money isn't real, not because it wouldn't be easier, but because some things should be protected. That land is clean water and old trees and space for your kids, your grandkids, to remember what matters. There's a man named Brian Prescott. He works for Horizon Development. He's been particularly persistent. I'm writing this in 2019, and he's already called me 6 times. He's young, ambitious, and he doesn't take no for an answer. I don't trust him. David, I looked into his company. They have a history of promising community development and delivering strip malls and condos that sit half empty. They cut corners. They pollute. They take and they leave nothing behind but broken promises and environmental cleanup sites. The deed is in your name now. It was always meant to be. But I sealed it here because I wanted you to find it in your own time. When you were ready. When you needed to remember why we hold on to things. Your mother wore this watch pinned to her dress at our wedding. She said it represented all the time we'd have together. She was wrong about the years we didn't get enough, but she was right about its value. Not in dollars. In moments. Protect the land, son. Protect the moments. Protect what matters. Love, Dad. I read the letter 3 times. Chen sat silently, giving me space. When I finally looked up, he was watching me with concern. This Brian Prescott, I said. Do you know him? Chen's expression darkened. Everyone in town knows him. He married Jennifer about 4 years ago, right? I nodded. Horizon Development has been buying up land all over the county. They came to me 2 years ago, wanted to buy this building, offered triple what it's worth. When I said no, They tried to get the city to condemn it, said it was structurally unsound. Chen gestured around his shop. This building has been here since 1923. It'll be here when we're both gone. What happened? I fought it. Cost me $10,000 in lawyer fees, but I fought it. They backed off. But, he shook his head. I see their projects around town. Cheap construction. They promise jobs, but they bring in workers from outside the county. They promise to preserve green spaces, but somehow those spaces always get paved over. And Brian Prescott is the face of all of it. Smiling at town council meetings, shaking hands, making promises. I looked down at the letter again. My father's handwriting. His warning. Written 5 years before Brian even met Jennifer. How did Brian meet Jennifer? I asked, though I already knew the answer. I just hadn't wanted to believe it. Chen's silence was answer enough. He targeted her, I said. She was my daughter. She would inherit the land when I died. He married access to what he wanted. David, how long has he been asking you to sell? 2 years, like I said. But it ramped up about 8 months ago, right around the time the county started talking about that new highway expansion. The land on Riverside Road suddenly became extremely valuable. Prime commercial location. I thought about the last 8 months. Brian's increasingly frequent suggestions about selling the land. Jennifer's strange distance from me. Her apologetic looks whenever Brian pushed the topic. The way he'd thrown the watch last night. Not anger. Frustration. He'd been searching. He'd been trying to find the deed. And when he saw me treating the watch like it mattered, like it had value beyond sentiment, he'd reacted. I need to make a copy of these documents, I said. Chen already had his phone out. I'll do it now. And David, be careful. Brian Prescott is connected. He plays golf with the mayor. His company funds half the local campaigns. I'm 67 years old, Thomas. I've got nothing to lose. You've got your granddaughter. That stopped me. Because he was right. Sarah was in that house, living under Brian's roof, subject to his moods and his manipulation. And Jennifer, my daughter, who'd once been so independent, so strong she'd been ground down by years of marriage to a man who measured everything by its monetary value. Chen made copies of the documents, front and back. He sealed the originals in a waterproof container. Keep these somewhere safe. Not your house. Not anywhere Brian might find them. What about the watch? I'll fix it. But David, maybe don't wear it around Brian. Not until you figure out what you're going to do. I drove home with the copies in my glove compartment and my father's words echoing in my head. Protect what matters. But what mattered most right now wasn't land or money or even my father's legacy. It was Sarah. It was Jennifer. My phone rang as I pulled into my driveway. Jennifer. Dad. Can we talk? Of course. Not on the phone. Can I come by? She arrived 20 minutes later. Alone. She looked tired. The Jennifer who'd walked across the stage at college graduation, who'd backpacked through Europe, who'd taught art at the community center that Jennifer had been fading for years. This woman getting out of her car looked older than 35. She looked defeated. We sat on my porch. Jennifer held a mug of coffee she didn't drink. Brian wants me to talk to you, she said finally. About the Riverside property. I figured, he says you're being stubborn, that the land is just sitting there, not generating any income, that we could use the money for Sarah's future. College fund, that kind of thing. And what do you think? She was quiet for a long time. I think I don't recognize my life anymore. I think I married a man I thought I loved, and now I'm not sure I ever knew him at all. I think my daughter barely talks to me because she's afraid of upsetting Brian. I think. Her voice cracked. I think I've made terrible choices, and I don't know how to fix them. I reached over and took her hand. When did this start? The pressure about the land? About 6 months ago. But the rest of it? God, Dad, I don't know. It was so gradual. Little comments at first. My paintings weren't good enough to display. My friends weren't sophisticated enough. My job at the community center didn't pay enough. And I kept changing things. Kept trying to be what he wanted. But it was never enough. What does he do when you push back? He doesn't yell. He's never violent. He just withdraws, goes cold, and he uses Sarah. Not explicitly, but he'll suggest that maybe Sarah should go to boarding school, somewhere she can get a better education. Or he'll criticize my parenting in front of her, make me feel like I'm failing her. Jennifer, look at me. She did. Her eyes were red. You're not failing her. But she needs you to be strong now. I need you to be strong now. What do you mean? I pulled out the copies Chen had made. I found these inside your grandfather's watch, hidden compartment. I think Brian knew they were there, or suspected. That's why he's been so aggressive about me getting rid of it. Jennifer read the letter slowly. I watched her face change as she realized what she was reading. What her father, my father, had known years before it happened. He married me for the land, she whispered. Maybe not entirely. Maybe he loved you too. At first. But yes, I think access to the property was a factor. Oh God. She pressed her hands to her face. What have I done? I brought him into our family. I gave him access to you, to Sarah, to everything. Jennifer, stop. We don't have time for guilt. We need to focus on what comes next. She lowered her hands. What do we do? First, we protect these documents. Brian cannot know I have them. Second, we need to understand what he's really planning. That development project, I need to know the details. He has files at home. Financial projections, contracts with the county. He keeps them in his office. Can you access them? He locks the office when he's not home. But when he is home, Jennifer's expression shifted. I saw a flicker of the old Jennifer, the one who'd been sharp and clever and brave. He's traveling next week. Denver. 3 days. He always leaves the office unlocked when he's away because he works from home the day before he leaves. Then we have a window. We spent the next hour planning. It felt like old times, like when Jennifer was 16 and we were plotting how to surprise Helen for her birthday. But this wasn't a surprise party. This was something much more serious. Jennifer left before Brian could wonder where she was. I sat on my porch as the sun set, holding my father's watch. Chen had called. The crystal was replaced, and the watch was running perfectly. But I didn't go pick it up. Not yet. Instead, I made another call. Tom Wilson had been my lawyer for 15 years. He'd handled Helen's will, my father's estate. He was semi-retired now, but when I explained what I'd found, he agreed to see me the next morning. Tom's office smelled like old books and coffee. He read the letter 3 times, examined the deed, and leaned back in his chair. Your father was a smart man, David. He knew something was wrong with Brian. He was cautious. That much is clear. And he was right to be. Tom tapped the deed. This is ironclad. The property is solely in your name. Brian has no legal claim to it whatsoever. But if Jennifer divorces him, things get complicated. Colorado is an equitable distribution state. If Jennifer has been living in the house you built on part of that property, if she's been paying taxes on it, Brian could argue for partial ownership through her. The house is on a different parcel. I kept them separate. Smart. Then he has no claim. But David, if he's as connected as you say, if he's as desperate as his behavior suggests, he won't let this go easily. Men like Brian Prescott don't take no for an answer. I know. That's why I need to understand what he's really planning. What's he going to do with the land, if he gets it? Tom pulled out his laptop. Let me do some digging. Horizon development. Let's see what they're really about. What Tom found over the next hour made my blood run cold. Horizon development had a pattern. They'd buy land under the promise of mixed-use development. Some retail, some residential, some green space. They'd get tax incentives from local governments. But once they had the land, the projects would balloon. Environmental regulations would be skirted. Promised amenities would disappear. And when the projects were done, they were cheap, poorly built, and environmentally damaging. 3 years ago in Kansas, Tom said, reading from his screen, they developed a site next to a wetland, promised to preserve it. Within 2 years, runoff from their parking lot had destroyed the ecosystem. State fined them, but the fine was less than what they made in profit. And Brian runs this company? He's the VP of acquisitions. His job is to get the land, by whatever means necessary, including marrying my daughter. Tom looked at me over his reading glasses. I can't prove that, David. But between us? Yeah. I think that's exactly what he did. The plan came together over the next 2 days. Jennifer would get into Brian's office while he was in Denver. She'd photograph every document she could find. Meanwhile, Tom would file a formal notice with the county that the Riverside property was not for sale and any development proposals involving it were unauthorized. It was a chess game. Each move calculated. Each risk weighed. Brian left for Denver on a Wednesday morning. I drove to Jennifer's house that afternoon, parking 2 streets over. She let me in through the back door. Sarah was at school. We had 3 hours. Brian's office was exactly what I'd expected. Modern furniture, sleek computer setup, walls covered with photos of completed projects. In the pictures, Brian stood next to mayors and council members, everyone smiling, everyone believing the promises he'd made. Jennifer's hands shook as she unlocked the filing cabinet. He doesn't know I have the key. I had a copy made last year when I was looking for Sarah's birth certificate. We worked quickly. Jennifer photographed while I kept watch. Contracts with the county, financial projections showing massive profits, environmental impact studies that had clearly been doctored, and in one folder marked Riverside Project, we found something that made my stomach turn. It was a development plan. The 47 acres would become a shopping complex, 300 luxury condos, and a hotel. The creek that ran through the property, the creek where my father had taught me to fish, would be diverted and covered. The old oak trees would be cleared. Every single thing my father had wanted to protect would be destroyed. But it was the financial projection that was most damning. Brian stood to make $8 million personally from this deal. And tucked into the back of the folder was a memo. Subject: Riverside Acquisition Strategy. Jennifer is key to this. Her father won't sell directly, but he's getting older. If we can position ourselves as the primary beneficiaries of his estate, we control the land after his death. Estimated timeline: 10 to 15 years. Alternative: find the original deed. Contest ownership. The old man says the deed is lost, but I don't believe it. Possibly hidden in family heirlooms. Watch. The memo ended there. But it was enough. It was more than enough. Jennifer photographed everything. When we were done, she carefully replaced each folder exactly as we'd found it. We locked the office. We left no trace we'd been there. He was planning for you to die, Jennifer said in my kitchen an hour later. She hadn't stopped shaking. He married me, and he was just waiting for you to die so he could take the land. We don't know that for certain. It's in writing, Dad. Position ourselves as primary beneficiaries. That's me. I'm the primary beneficiary. And he's been so patient, so calculated, oh God. What if he wasn't going to wait? What if he was going to— Jennifer, stop. We don't know that. What we know is that he's a fraud and a manipulator. That's what we can prove. She was crying now. Years of pain and realization hitting her all at once. I brought him into our lives. I gave him access to everything. To you. To Sarah. I held her while she cried. The way I'd held her when she was 5 and she'd fallen off her bike. When she was 13 and her first boyfriend had broken her heart. When she was 22 and her mother died. Some things don't change. Fathers catch daughters when they fall. When she'd calmed down, we laid out everything on my dining room table. Tom came over. The 3 of us went through every document, every photograph, building the case. This is enough, Tom said finally. This is enough for fraud charges. Enough for an ethics investigation. Enough to sink his company. What about Jennifer? I asked. What about Sarah? Jennifer needs to file for divorce. Immediately. Before Brian realizes what we know, he'll fight it, Jennifer said. He'll use Sarah. He'll drag this out for years. Then we go to court prepared. We show the judge these documents. We show that Brian married you under false pretenses. We show that he's a threat to your financial security and potentially to your safety. What about the land? Jennifer asked. If I divorce him, will he still try to get it? Tom shook his head. Not legally. But men like Brian have other ways. Political pressure. Media campaigns. making your life difficult until you give up. Then we don't give up, I said. We go on the offensive. The next week was a blur. Jennifer filed for divorce. Tom filed fraud complaints with the state. We sent the documents to a journalist at the Denver Post who'd been investigating Horizon development for months. Brian came back from Denver to find his world collapsing. I'll never forget the phone call. It was 1:01 p.m. on a Thursday. Brian's voice was cold with rage. You did this. I protected what's mine, I said. That land should have been mine. Jennifer is my wife. What's yours is hers, and what's hers is mine. Colorado law disagrees with you. You're a foolish old man clinging to sentiment. That land is worth millions. You could have set up your daughter and granddaughter for life. Instead, you're sitting on it like a dragon hoarding gold. The dragon hoarding gold is you, Brian. My father saw it. I should have seen it sooner. Your father was a nobody, a builder who died with nothing to show for it but some land and an old watch. My father died with something you'll never have. Integrity. Brian laughed. Integrity doesn't pay Sarah's college tuition. Integrity doesn't buy Jennifer the life she deserves. You know what your precious integrity is? It's selfishness. You're keeping that land because of some sentimental attachment to memories. Well, memories don't matter. Old man, money matters. Power matters. And I have both. You had both. Past tense. I hung up. The custody hearing was 3 weeks later. Tom had prepared me for what to expect. Brian would paint Jennifer as unstable. He'd argue that I'd manipulated her into filing for divorce. He'd use every weapon in his arsenal. But we had weapons too. The hearing room was smaller than I'd expected. Judge Morrison was a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and no patience for nonsense. Brian sat with his lawyer, confident and composed. Jennifer sat with Tom, and I sat behind them, holding my father's watch. Chen had done beautiful work. The crystal was flawless. The watch ran perfectly. And in the back, in the hidden compartment, we'd placed copies of all the documents we'd found. Brian's lawyer went first. He painted a picture of a loving father concerned for his daughter's welfare. He suggested that Jennifer was having a mental health crisis, influenced by her elderly father, who was clearly experiencing cognitive decline. It was masterful. It was also completely false. Then Tom stood up. Your Honor, I'd like to enter into evidence a series of documents that paint a very different picture of Mr. Prescott's intentions and character. Over the next hour, Tom presented everything. The memo about positioning for inheritance, the fraudulent environmental studies, the pattern of broken promises at other Horizon development projects, the doctored financial projections. I watched Brian's face as each piece was revealed. The confidence cracked, the composure fractured. By the time Tom was done, Brian looked like what he was, a con artist whose con had been exposed. But it was Jennifer's testimony that sealed it. She spoke quietly but clearly about the years of emotional manipulation, the way Brian had isolated her from friends, the way he'd used Sarah as a weapon, the way he'd been obsessed with the Riverside property, turning every conversation back to it, pressuring her father, making her feel guilty for not helping him get what he wanted. He didn't marry me because he loved me, she said. He married me because my father owned something he wanted. And when I realized that, when I saw the documents proving it, I knew I had to protect my daughter from that kind of man. Judge Morrison listened to everything. She asked pointed questions. She examined the documents herself, and when she finally spoke, her voice was firm. Mr. Prescott, I find your conduct reprehensible. You entered into a marriage with ulterior motives. You used your position of trust to manipulate your wife and attempt to defraud her father. The evidence presented today demonstrates a pattern of deceit that calls into question your judgment and your character. She turned to Jennifer. Miss Prescott, I'm granting your request for divorce. I'm also awarding you sole custody of Sarah, with supervised visitation for Mr. Prescott pending a full psychological evaluation. Brian erupted. His lawyer tried to calm him, but he was beyond reason. This is bullshit! That old man poisoned her against me! The land is worth. The land, Judge Morrison said coldly. is not your concern. This hearing is about what's best for your daughter. And based on what I've seen today, what's best for Sarah is to be as far from your influence as possible. We left the courthouse in sunlight. Jennifer was crying, but this time with relief. Tom was already on his phone, coordinating with the journalist about the expose that would run the next week. And I stood on the steps, holding my father's watch, thinking about his letter. Protect what matters. I'd done that. Not just the land, not just the memories, but Jennifer, Sarah, the future. Sarah came to stay with me that weekend while Jennifer sorted through the practical details of disentangling her life from Brian's. We went fishing at Riverside Creek, just like my father had taken me 40 years ago. "Grandpa?" Sarah asked as she baited her hook. "Are you and Mom going to be okay?" "We're going to be fine, sweetheart." "What about the watch? Is it still broken?" I pulled it out and showed her. The crystal gleamed in the sunlight. The hands moved smoothly. "Mister, Chen fixed it." "Can I see the secret part?" "Mom told me there's a secret inside." I opened the hidden compartment. It was empty now. The documents were with Tom, secured as evidence, but the space remained, a reminder of what had been hidden there. "Your great-grandfather put something very important in here," I said. "Something he wanted to keep safe." "What was it?" "A reminder about what really matters." "What really matters?" I looked at her serious little face, her grandmother's eyes staring back at me. "You do, Sarah. Your mom does. The people we love, the places we protect, the promises we keep. That's what really matters." She thought about this for a moment. "Not money? Money helps. But it's not what makes life worth living. Brian always said money was the most important thing. Brian was wrong about a lot of things." We fished until the sun started to set, painting the creek gold and red. Sarah caught 2 trout. I caught 1. We threw them all back, watching them swim away into the clear water. That night, after Sarah was asleep in the guest room, I sat on my porch with the watch in my hand. The land stretched out before me, exactly as my father had left it. 47 acres of memories and possibilities. Developers would come again. They always did. But now I knew what my father had known. Some things aren't for sale. The next morning, Jennifer and I had coffee on the porch, while Sarah explored the property. Tom had called with news. The Denver Post article was running tomorrow. Horizon Development was facing multiple investigations. Brian's assets were being frozen pending fraud charges. "It's over," Jennifer said. "It's really over. The legal part maybe, but you've got a long road ahead. Rebuilding. Figuring out who you are without him." "I know." She was quiet for a moment. "Dad, I'm sorry. For not seeing what he was. For bringing him into our family. You fell in love. Or you thought you did. There's nothing to apologize for. But if I'd been stronger, you're strong now. That's what matters." We watched Sarah across the field. She'd found the old oak tree, the one my father had proposed to my mother under. She was trying to climb it, her small hands finding holds in the bark. "What are you going to do with the land?" Jennifer asked. "Really? I don't know yet. Maybe a conservation trust. Maybe donate part of it for a park. Maybe just let it be. But whatever happens, it'll be on our terms. Not Brian's. Not any developers. Ours." "Dad? Yeah? Thank you. For protecting us. For protecting all of this." I reached over and squeezed her hand. That's what fathers do. A month later, Chen called me back to his shop. "I've got something for you," he said. He led me to his workbench and pulled out a small wooden box. Inside was my father's watch, but also something else. A new watch, smaller, delicate. "I made this for Sarah," Chen said. "Same design as your father's watch, same hidden compartment. When she's older, when she needs to protect something important, she'll have a place for it." I picked up the watch. It was beautiful. Perfect. "How much do I owe you?" Chen waved his hand. "Call it a gift. For a family that understands what things are really worth." I gave Sarah the watch on her 9th birthday. Jennifer and I took her back to Riverside Creek, to the oak tree. I showed her how to open the hidden compartment. "What should I put inside?" she asked. Whatever matters most to you. Whatever you want to protect. She thought for a long moment. Then she pulled out a small photograph from her pocket. It was a picture of her grandmother, my Helen, holding Sarah as a baby. Sarah folded it carefully and placed it in the compartment. "This," she said. "This is what matters." I watched her close the watch, saw her face serious and determined. Helen's eyes. My father's resolve. A legacy that had nothing to do with money or land, and everything to do with understanding what's worth protecting. That night, I wound my father's watch, like he'd done every morning for 40 years. The rhythm was familiar now. Steady, reliable. A reminder that time passes, but some things endure. The land remains, the creek runs clear, the oak tree stands, and in a small watch shop on Market Street, Thomas Chen works late into the evening, repairing the broken things people bring him, protecting the pieces of their past that still matter. Because some things are worth saving, some things are worth fighting for, and some things, no matter what anyone offers, are never for sale.